And now it's time to read data from databases. We have already done that in our real example with Pandas part of the tutorial. But I want to show you a little bit more details so you understand how data is being processed in case this is a common scenario from you, importing data from databases. So the libraries you will need, first thing, depending on what database engine you're using, Postgres, MySQL, Oracle, etc., you will need to install different libraries. But the APIs, once you have installed those libraries, are going to be the same. There's actually PEP from Python that actually defines the interface for databases libraries, and Pandas can work with pretty much any database of these SQL common database that comply with that interface. In this example, we're going to use SQLite because the database is right here. There's nothing, no server to connect, etc. It's extremely simple to get started. And the example we're going to use, or the database example we're going to use, is actually a different one from our previous database rating. In the previous one, we were using Sakila. In this case, we're going to be using Chinook, which is smaller, both in structure and in size. So it's going to be a little bit simpler. So to get things going here, the same thing that we did with our previous part, that was how to read data from files, I show you how to actually read data using Python. So forget about pandas for a second. I told you if we go back again to the beginning of time, there was no pandas. This was the way we were reading files: open, fp, read lines, etc. So I now want to show you what predates to pandas. What was the default way to read data before pandas, which is with the regular, again, interface from Python. So the way it works is we're going to import SQLite 3. We're going to create a connection, and now with this connection, we have this common interface that, again, is common for pretty much any other database that you're used to. And the default behavior is we're going to create a cursor, and we're going to execute queries using that cursor. In this case, we're going to execute a regular select star from employees limit 5. So we want to have five records out of the table employees. Once you have executed the query, it's like there waiting. You can do a fetch all to get all the results of that query. And here are all these results. As you are noticing, this is the result is a list of tuples, so it's not extremely useful. Now, if you combine it with pandas, you can just create a data frame out of that info and work close. It's not perfect, but work close. So let me show you now, before we're gonna close the cursor and the connection, let me show you now how we work with pandas. With pandas, we have a read CSV method, we also have a read SQL method. And in this case, what this method is going to receive is the first parameter is going to be the query that we're passing, and the second parameter is going to be the connection that the connection object to actually issue the connection by pandas. So it gets as simple as writing the query, and now everything has been imported into a data frame, including column names and all that. If you want to get a little bit fancier, you can either specify the index column that is going to be used, of course, as the index, and also what types to parse for a specific column. So now we have pretty much all the work done. So we're going from something very manual, as processing things with a cursor, etc., which might also be slow, to using pandas to directly import the data from the database. There is actually a caveat here that I'm going to tell you. It's kind of a very deep detail of the way pandas works, and is that the read SQL method is actually a shell for two other methods: read SQL query and read SQL table. All right, so read SQL table and read SQL query. When you're using read SQL, it's actually kind of forwarding the work to either query or table. Read SQL query is the default behavior, what we've done so far. So in this case, it's just gonna issue a query and the connection is gonna read it for you. In contrast, read SQL table is gonna read an entire table. You just pass a name, and it's gonna automatically give you all the information for it. So in this case, all the column names, etc. So it's a lot simpler to read an entire table. The only thing to keep in mind is that to use this method, you need to install this library, SQL Alchemy, and the connections generated from it. So in this case, we create an engine and we create a connection object, and now we can pass a connection object for pandas to do it. So again, it's pretty much the same. If you find yourself doing read start from this table, read start from that table. It's a lot easier just to read SQL table, and that's gonna do it just at once. As we saw that read CSV files had read CSV method had a toCSV method. The same thing happens with read SQL. There is a read SQL and there is also a toSQL. And what it's gonna let you do is get from the database and write it down into a database table directly. So it's gonna also receive the connection, right? So toSQL is gonna receive what table name of this data frame, what table name is gonna be, and a connection object. Now, something to keep in mind is that toSQL has an important parameter, which is what happens if the table already exists. In the default way, it's gonna fail. It's just gonna throw an error when you are trying to save data to a table. And this makes sense because as data analysts, we're usually reading data and processing it. We're not so much writing it, so we wanna make sure that it's not by mistake. But if you do actually wanna write data, you can just change this parameter if exists to something like replace or append. Usually we're writing to intermediary tables. Again, you can choose either to replace the whole contents of the table, be careful here, or to append, right? Just write it at the end of the current table. So that's just for toSQL. So this was the way to read data from databases. Of course, we're not touching on anything like SQL and all that it's a lot more advanced. It's just for you if you already know SQL, if you're already working with databases, you can pretty much copy and paste what we're doing here, and you're gonna get your data imported into Python. So let's move forward to read some HTML files. And now, very quickly, I'm gonna show you how to read tables or data frames directly from HTML web pages. To be honest, this is a simple method. It's going to be just read HTML, but it depends a lot on the structure of the web page. So if it's not well structured or the tables are not correctly created, you're going to have issues and you will have to do a ton of data cleaning. In my experience, whenever I try to parse a table from a well-structured site like Wikipedia or some stats site, it usually works very well, and it's a very quick way of hacking. Whenever you have questions, like, I don't know, I need to know the GDP of countries. Instead of looking for a GDP data set, you can just go to a Wikipedia page. There is usually a table there. You can directly parse it, and you are done. So again, it's a relatively simple way to get some data for quick hacking and exploration. The way it's going to work is we have this HTML created. It's just for testing purposes to get us started. Usually, of course, you will try to read something from a live website. So you're going to pass the URL to the read HTML method, and the read HTML method will download the content of the page and parse it. Let's suppose we have the content already, the HTML, and this is what it looks like. This is exactly the same HTML we have on top. I'm just displaying it here in the notebook. And what we're going to do is we're going to invoke the method read HTML. The read HTML method is going to parse the entire HTML and look for multiple tables, not just one. Sites will potentially have multiple tables. Even if you don't see them, it's a common way to structure things in HTML to use tables. That's why it's going to parse multiple tables. In this case, we store them all in the DFS, multiple plural, right? Multiple data frames, and we see there is only one. So in that case, we're just going to get the first data frame, and it has correctly parsed what we had before, just working in the same way. The same is going to happen with, for example, things for headers and all that. If the table doesn't have a header, it's going to automatically, right, understand that in that case. So that's pretty much as we know it already. In this case, what you're going to see is that what I told you before about data cleaning process, that this table does not have a header like the previous one that has a t-head attribute. In this case, a header is just another row. So that's why read HTML is going to have issues, and you have to provide a little bit extra information.